Civil Media.
Денес ќе зборуваме на две теми. Едната ќе се однесува на тоа каде се наоѓа Македонија меѓу надежите и меѓу реалност. А се разбира, ќе зборуваме и за тоа како 2018-та и 2019-та, што е пред нас, по која навлеговме, ќе придонесе кон историските завршници, а тие завршници како ќе придонесат кон отворање на новите перспективи на Република Северна Македонија. Тоа што ние се обидуваме како организација да го правиме од година в година е да собереме што е можно повеќе луѓе кои критички размислуваат за тоа што се случува во земјата. Се обидуваме да му дадеме тон на оно што го правиме како дел од граѓанското општество, а се разбира и да придонесеме кон решенијата на тековните проблеми. Мене денеска ми е посебна чест да ви сообштам дека во првата сесија која се однесува на поздравни воведни говори, кои секако не се ни оддалеку само поздравни, туку ќе има и многу суштина во нив, ако знаеме кои се говорничката и говорникот, па веднаш би сакал да ги најавам нив. Прво ќе говори неговата екселенција амбасадорот на Сојузна Република Германија, господин Том.
The ambassador of Germany, and then the Minister of Labor and Social Policy, Mila Carovska, and they will be followed by the other speakers. And in order to save paper, I will just read their names from the monitor, from this display that I have. We will have Professor Miljana Najčevska, Jevdet Khairedini, Branko Gerovski, Aleksandar Kržalovski, Mirsiha Ismailović, Kočo Andonovski, and Faton Aliti. On behalf of Civil, there will be several speakers who will be later announced after the coffee break, because we will have a coffee break. So now we'd like to invite the ambassador of Germany, His Excellency Thomas Gerberich.
The right time to organize such a meeting, which offers an opportunity to decision makers, to experts, and to interested representatives of the public to have a discussion about the current political situation in Northern Macedonia. It is an important time for your country. After the positive outcome of the implementation process of the Prespa Agreement, especially after the ratification of the NATO accession protocol at the Greece Parliament last week, and the announcement yesterday in the official gazette, the way for NATO and EU accession now is really open. And allow me to quote our Minister for EU Affairs, Michael Roth, who wrote in the German newspaper Die Welt, I quote, "Brave and dedicated politicians in both sides made history via the personal pledge. The debates in Skopje and Athens were controversial and full with nationalism and fears. For solving this issue, Prime Ministers Alexis Tsipras and Zoran Zaev politically risked a lot. However, they gained a lot for their states and the whole region. And now we, and with we, I mean the Macedonian government, the Macedonian society, and the EU and Germany together, must concentrate fully on the reform process that will finally lead to the full membership in NATO and the EU on the basis of a new Macedonian society which offers opportunities and best living conditions for everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, the way in front of you and of us will not be easy, and sometimes it will be also painful. There will be no automatism, and the time is running. The European Council will decide in June 2019 on whether enlargement accession negotiations will start with regard to further progress of the reforms. But one thing is clear. The EU perspective for your country is true, and it is now more real than ever. Besides the challenges of the Prespa agreement, you have started impressive reforms last year. This concerns in particular the judicial reform, the administrative reform, and the fight against corruption and organized crime. And the EU perspective is especially important for the young generation which aspire Europe. For that reason, a concrete advancement in the accession process is necessary. And it is of the strategic interest of the EU. If EU does not succeed in Balkans, in the region which is historically, geographically and culturally close with us, then how can it be seen as a serious global actor? Allow me to quote State Minister Roth again. In the time when populism and nationalism test the European model, reconciliation between Macedonia and Greece is a real motive for the rest of Europe. Unification instead of separation, dialogue and compromise instead of nationalism and selfishness. That is what the EU partners should take as an example. I really hope that you will succeed and that by the end of 2019, negotiations will actually start. And I'm sure that your society and your government will manage to continue the reform course in a focused manner against political pressure from inside and from outside. I thank you very much for your attention and I wish you much success in today's discussion. Thank you very much.
This beautiful announcement. Good day to all of you. It is my great pleasure to be here at this event. I kind of feel like home because many civil organizations are here, many people I like and with whom we fought together. And I even prefer more the title of the event because it speaks about the prospects, perspectives, visions and hopes. Vision. I believe that we need more time to build it. That's how it seems to me. Whereas hope, we should not lose the hope in the population because this is something that could help us in the entire situation, because in the essence it is the last thing that keeps the citizens hoping that things will improve. And then finally Macedonia, North Macedonia, which has finally resolved a big issue, has made the big step, and now the expectations are that now we will present a vision where we'll move, and that the hope will still remain in the citizens, that there will be a better country for them. As the Ministry of Labor and Social Policy in 2018, we have shown that if there is a will, then there is a way to obtain more funds, to make more courageous steps, so that citizens would be able to feel that something is moving towards the better, that the problems in the social sector and in the poverty in Macedonia, yes, there will be problems because even richer countries have not been able to face all social challenges. But it is important to note that we are not violating human rights in the institutions, and this is the huge reform in this process, and we hope that by 2021 it will be a completed process if we proceed working with the same intensity. We are putting too much passion and intensity in the reform, especially regarding the poverty reduction in children, social transfers and development of social services at local level, because social protection does not only mean, but it also means support for all those who belong in the vulnerable groups and who need such support. And all this reform is still waiting in the parliament, and I expect that all MPs with a national consensus will say yes, Macedonia needs social protection, which is contemporary, and I will jointly vote it in February, because I think it is actually the final month in which we should adopt this reform, because this is something that we promised to the citizens, and that in April such social services will be established for the citizens. The perspective for 2019 is that the law on non-discrimination will be put into practice. We will have an operational non-discrimination committee which will know according to which principles and protocols they will work, because they also have a dedicated budget for its functioning, and you expect to select quality personnel that will be able to dedicate themselves to this issue, as well as that the children poverty will be reduced to the minimum, because we're really investing in children coming from families in social risk. About 2020 we will speak at the end of 2019, but I think that we have already set the vision, and me as a minister, together with my entire team, we are managing to show that one step at a time. We are kind of not that pleased to be right after the Minister Mila Carovska, because our visions of perspectives and visions are much different, but maybe this is also good, so as for the people to see that there are different perceptions about what is going on in the society. There were really high expectations that after 11 of years going backwards and a ruling that has shown a lot of evident moments of fascism, and in addition to the populism and populistic sound of this term, of people to use it. So after all these years we expected change, which will be a revolutionary change from the roots, system change, overall comprehensive, multi-layer, and not only scrapping the surface of the problems. However, it was shown that the roots of the problem are much deeper than originally, and that in fact we are not talking about political party single-mindedness or partization of the state. In fact, in my opinion, in Macedonia there are no political parties, but we have ethnic tribal clans calling themselves political parties, and they, under the term political fight to winning the government, are actually hiding the fight for conquering the territory. And in fact, when a political party wins, the ethno-clan, they are not conquering the power, the government in the state, but are actually conquering the territory of the state and acts as an occupant of a hostile country and hostile territory, which wants to draw as much as possible from them in that short period available to them, because afterwards they will be replaced by the same party who has the same intentions and wishes. And in order to show that they have won the enemy territory, they are coloring the territory with their colors: red, white, blue, and so on and so forth. If you have played Pokemon, you should know that. And they share this because they have their allies when they are conquering someone else's territory. In my opinion, this corresponds to the development of the general consciousness, which has stopped at precisely those ethnic tribal relations. So after winning the enemy territory, each tribe from an ethnic community takes with them their tribal friends. And then we have Stip clan, or from Prilep, or from Kumanovo, Bitola, and so on and so forth. And suddenly there are benefits for those who belong to a particular specific ethnic tribal community. With the members of the others ethnic tribal communities, they have arrangements, they even smoke the pipes of peace, etc. But the biggest problem are those who are undetermined, who are undefined. They don't know what to do with them. And when they assume the power, they're trying to color them in their own colors. And if they fail to do that with some of them, those people are proclaimed as members of the other ethnic tribal community, or simply ignore them as if they are non-existing. And in this old kind of stew, someone comes and says there are recommendations for urgent reforms, independent regulatory control authorities, which is kind of ridiculous, and then members with professional capacities, professional experience corresponding with the area, then comparative advantage in their appointment and selection. And no one mentions the tribes, imagine that. And then we have depoliticization of public administration, transparency, legal equity representation. And before that, we need the numbers in order to find out what the needs are. This is something which is an unknown territory for our ethnic and tribal communities. What experience and so on and so forth. The new tribes comes to the government and just wins the territory, most transparently. Nothing is hidden, everything is open. And they say, until now, another tribe was here, but now we have the government and our tribe will have the privileges that the other tribe had previously. And everything will be in accordance with the law, because the law, we are the law. And now you are asking me about perspectives, and you are expecting me to say something smart and intelligent. There are no perspectives until we leave the development level which corresponds to the ethnic tribal regulation and governments. No one can move forward. The tribal alliance composed of VMRO-DPMNE, SDS and UI does not meet the conditions to make any changes whatsoever. And at the end, I have to say that the foreign factor also has a lot of their share, and they have to take their responsibility. And they have not stood behind the civil model, but more or less they have flirted with the ethnic and the tribal part. That's it from my behalf. And if there are some tribal chiefs here, you would probably have some more cameras and media than you have right now. Thank you for the attention. I believe that Macedonia, or part of the government led by Zaev, and the objectives set by him, for example, the announcement that the next year will be an economic year. I had the occasion on several times to criticize these statements, because it is impossible for a year to be proclaimed as an economic year, especially economic one, because economy cannot be a subject for a single year, because all years have to be economic, and some other specific objectives are objectives to be insisted and strive towards being realized within 1 year by the government, and so on and so forth. However, I want to speak about one aspect of the problems, which is the potential danger and the potential bomb or obstruction of any reform whatsoever in the next year that the citizens of Macedonia and the EU expect. We know the importance of the accession of Macedonia in NATO, that's why I don't have to mention this. However, I want to go a bit back to the Pržino agreement and how it was reached. And this is not by chance why I insist on this, because some of the participants at the negotiations in Pržino is currently in the government. That time it was very difficult, in addition to postponing a bit the early elections. What was even more difficult was the establishment of the Special Public Prosecution Office, and to prohibit the further publishing of the famous bombs. Recently, the minister that you have mentioned, Mr. Roth, also indicated and said that those bombs should continue to be published. This is a recommendation of the Venetian Commission as well, and it is also a recommendation of PRIBE. However, this faced significant resistance. Currently, the reforms being expected to be realized in 2019 will face the resistance of the coalition partner DUI in terms of the continuation of the work of the Special Public Prosecution Office. I don't want this to be understood as something minor, because such reforms really need the 80 MPs in the Assembly, and it will be difficult to expect to publish those bombs from any side, and there is also an imminent danger for such bombs to emerge from different sides. And maybe Zaev can agree on this, although for the bombs, for the officials of DUI, they have them themselves. I don't know how, but they were provided with them. They were given such bombs, and they cannot allow for any bomb to be published, because it would bring into question the functioning of the coalition. And DUI will not allow and vote for the changes of the electoral code. In one occasion, the leader of this political party at the latest elections has posed a question on a debate for women in Tetovo, why this person is for the third time proposed to be in the MP's list, and they just answered, what can I do with him? He doesn't even know how to work a painting job. So he doesn't say the people have selected him. He just says, I have nothing to do with him, because he cannot provide for his family in any other manner. And they will not allow, due to those reasons, the change of the electoral code by which the citizens could vote individuals that would represent their interests in front of the Assembly. Maybe to some this might seem naive, but no further reforms in the in the state administration, in the judiciary, will not be allowed, because 2,000 or 3,000 people who account for 20 or 30,000 voters because they are actually bringing money to their homes from the state budget, public budget, paid by all of us. And those who will try, for example, to change those things, for example, the civil courts and judiciary and so on, and if anyone mentioning the corruption of the head officials of DUI, there is a special judge who I don't want to mention. They are immediately sanctioned with insults and defamation. So in such cases, when they occur, this judge is given with those cases. There was a huge, for example, scandal with Telecom in Macedonia, and afterwards it was expanded. Why am I mentioning all these things? Because if a step is made forward to resolve this issue, And if it is not made, there will be no reforms. And if we make these steps, then huge reforms will have to take place. And Dewey is also faced with the triple reduction of their voters, and I have written on this topic as well. And if they fail to remove those persons who obstruct them, they will also cause the hindrance for this entire process. Much of this goes in favor of those MPs from VMRO who are now outside of VMRO. So it will be very difficult for any form to be passed at the Assembly if it is somehow concerned with their position. So soon we will all witness, because there are such symptoms, that any reform whatsoever, and the Minister of Labour and Social Policy is well informed of that, and we know that such reforms, any potential reforms, will face the resistance to their implementation. So these are the actual dangers or threats that might emerge during this year, which would concern the potential efforts to open such issues. And also, I would like to use this opportunity to indicate that this abuse of political leaders at the meetings with the foreign representatives, especially the ambassadors who go to Mala Rečica, because I have nothing to blame them for, because they changed, but the parties are using them for propaganda objectives, and now we receive lengthy announcements what the leader has told the ambassador. For example, to you, ambassador, and so on and so forth. So they give details what they have said, but they say nothing about what the ambassador has told them. And for 5 and even more years, the EU ambassador was here. He was more than 5 years here, and he had frequent visits, frequent meetings, and they had many announcements. For example, the EU ambassador supports us, and so on and so forth. And at the end 2014, the ambassador Ervan Fuere came to their Congress, and I was present at that Congress, and he was asking them questions. Gentlemen, could you tell us what did you do during your position and authority and government? And but why didn't you, ambassador, say that they are doing nothing? And you're asking this question after your term has been completed. This is a question that I wanted to ask him, but I didn't ask him. So even the foreign representatives, whether they're ambassadors, representatives, and so on and so forth, would have to know what do the political parties do, especially Dewey, for example, and how they abuse their meetings with them. Yes, there are meetings, but not only what they said, but also what the other party has said. Oh, we will say nothing because the meeting was secret, and so on and so forth. What I said was an intention, there was an objective, because I wanted all of you to know what we will witness in the next months ahead. There will be no parliamentary elections. I hope that the year will be an economic one, but with the measures being undertaken by this government, I don't see that any results will be produced whatsoever which would help the revival of the economy. Because regardless of that, the NATO accession would not resolve this problem for us. Even Albania has acceded NATO, but it is a good thing, but these issues regarding the economy, corruption, crime cannot be resolved in that manner. So we are daily witnessing the corruption affairs, and more steps are required to be undertaken in that direction. So it is the case in Albania, and it will be the case in our country. And at the end, I would like to quote the latest president of the Anti-Corruption Commission. They say that they were experts, but where did they prepare themselves for corruption in Macedonia? And she said that her first step would be dealing with the challenges of the presidential elections challenges. But you are witnesses of the corruptive behavior of the members of this government, and you are now announcing that the first step would be the dealing with the challenges of the presidential elections, as if you know in advance that immediately there will be corruptive behavior there. I usually start with jokes at the beginning, so I want to know that it's kind of colder now. I don't know if it's probably because of the name Northern Macedonia and so on and so forth. Hopefully not. I would somehow, it is probably my objective to end the pessimism of the previous speakers and start speaking more optimistically. And I always think of myself as a more optimistic person. And going closer to the 50 years of my life, I'm kind of an informed optimist, and for some it is a definition for a pessimist, and hopefully I have not translated to that side yet. Through the years of working in the center and this entire social life in Macedonia, if nothing else, I have learned to be more realistic and not to expect much, so that my expectations would be more harmonized with the actual situation and the assessment of movements. So as when this government was established 2 years ago, some of the ambassadors have asked about the expectations, and at that time my main expectation was not to expect much, or not to expect that much would change. Not that they are not better, but because of the people and the human capacity that we have here, so it's probably not be very much different, with exceptions, of course. I did not mention any names, but at that time I did not know about the minister Mila Carovska, who is one of my more positive surprises. Unfortunately, as one can see during these days, kind of my expectations are coming to reality, that things are moving more or less the same. So in that respect, we should not expect too much. I will say an anecdote which I often mention, and which pertains to the discussion in the negotiation in Israel and Palestine in '85, when the lead negotiators, Shimon Peres and Said Begati, these were the lead negotiators, although there were other lead figures. They were talking before the signing, and one says to the other, "Do you know why we hate you so much, the Israelis and the Palestinians?" I don't know who said what, and the other one said, "Why? You remind us too much of us." And probably this is something which is also reflected here, regardless whether it is on ethnic basis, Macedonian, Albanians, or party basis, VMRO, SDS, and so on and so forth. So we should slowly start overcoming that and starting to understand how similar we are. I reminded myself that I have already said this on some of the interviews for Civil, and we should also not expect that someone from outside will change this for us, because the change should start and end with us, and we are the ones that should do this change. And I believe that very soon we will face it. The day yesterday was one of the indicators for that. For the referendum, everyone came to the country and said that the agreement was good. Yesterday, for the NATO flag, I was not able to see any important figures being present from NATO and from other NATO alliance members, which would show us that they are here with us. I'm very pleased to have here present with us the German ambassador, which also shows what I have also previously mentioned, that we are the ones who should do much, even everything, and not to expect for someone else to resolve our problems. And they will of course support us, push us towards that objective, but we are the ones who should do the change. And to conclude with the Prespa agreement, for which it is no secret that I was one of the opponents and a critic, although I believe it is good that it was reached. This is something that I have been talking about and written about, but now I believe that it's good that we have it, and I have congratulated the people who have moved this process forward and completed it, because if nothing less, we have crossed the psychological barrier, and I think that again we will face with what I have been talking about, because it is now up to us to do all the reforms required and changes and movements on the path towards the EU. I know that it is good that we will be NATO member, but the question is about the EU, because the EU will not accept us until we make the reforms. In economic terms, it is better when you are in NATO and outside of EU, because we will have a lot of investments shown from the experience. Now we have the agreement, and we should use it, at least in economic terms, to move things forward, to provide as much investments as possible, thereby preventing the brain drain from Macedonia, although it's a very difficult process to stop, which also results into changes of the value chain. This is something that we have been talking for years, and we have failed in making it reality, because if we do that and if we succeed, we will have a more real perspectives. And as Jevdet and Najčevska have said, as we see the actual situation, it will be difficult for us to speak of any bright future or perspectives, regardless of our moving pace towards the EU. Thank you. We all have kind of a cold, because the stress kind of reduces the immunity, so we will have to work on that optimism more for the sake of our collective health. My statement before was given in a very difficult day for all legal persons and fighters for human rights, because the amnesty law was then adopted, and that is why I was too real, not pessimistic but too real, and I don't see much changes today. In December, I think 18th, I attended a conference near Belgrade. It was a Saturday when the protests in Belgrade started. The day was called Stop Bloody Shirts. It was organized by Women in Black, an organization existing from the 90s, even before that, and which through non-violent activism they showed their opinion and position regarding the situation in the Balkans or the former Yugoslavia at that time. So they exist also in Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, and so on and so forth. Although we were focused on the seminar, everyone was closely following the protests in events in Belgrade. When I said that I was that I was from Macedonia, on the next break, everyone was around me and asking me the questions: what is the situation in Macedonia? There was kind of a spark in their eyes and hope. What is going on in Macedonia, and so on and so forth, because they were currently facing the commencement of the protests for something that they are fighting about. I wanted to support them because those protests were envisaged for to be held every Saturday, not every day as they are currently held. I just mentioned that changes will be slow, but never to give up, no matter how many protests will have to be held, and that they should remain on the same line and not give up the fight. Although the darkness, although they live in such darkness, there will be some stars that will shine the road for them. So I wanted to give them hope. They were also asking me about the laws and regulations, and we were also one of the first countries in the region who voted the Istanbul Convention, and they were asking me about the steps. I was trying to provide them with an optimistic image. I wanted to tell them that it is very difficult to do such events and protests in winter, and that they need optimism. I told them that they should take it slowly and not stop. What is important is not to stop. I also understood at that moment that I should also not stop. Jaber presented me as a promoter of human rights for immigrants and refugees, but it is a wider scope of struggle, which I also had while I was a law student. But when speaking about refugees and immigrants, what we managed is that from a local level, a local fight, to increase it to a higher level. That is when I understood that we have been facing with huge tragedy, and it was difficult to find humanity, which we were always filled with negative, adverse feelings. But we did not allow for this to stain our fate, that humanity will prevail. Although it is difficult for this to be experienced, but this is something that I spoke with Professor Najcevska before, is that people who often read us on the social media, and because of our realistic and pessimistic approach, they also become disappointed. So what should we do? Should we lie to them? Should we provide them an optimistic or pessimistic or realistic picture? What I understood is that we should talk about the positive things that happen in our society. Perhaps we are too much surrounded by corruption, by politics, by law and so on. For example, if you post a picture that you have helped a person, this is something that is widely shared on the social media as something positive going on in society. And at the end, what is actually giving me the strength and what is making me an optimistic person is that my struggle in the last 10 years, I finally understood that I cannot fight things that I cannot change. Unfortunately, the mindset is difficult to change. I live in an environment, I live in Chair, where the law on language is was always functional. You have to know Albanian if you want to get a discount in the shops, or if you want to understand the salesperson. But we should be aware of the things that can be changed, and we should fight in that respect. What we need is knowledge and wisdom in terms of how to face and recognize all things happening in our society. So we should present the realistic image, but always what people always need is for them to be provided with solutions to the relevant problems. What you are trying to do is to do your best in order to help everyone in the best way possible. Thank you. One of the other problems that are being multiplied in the society is the electoral model. In simple words, the MPs, those who are selected by the people, are not selected by the people but from the political parties, and therefore their responsibility and their accountability is towards the political party and to the so-called tribal chief, as the professor would say, and not towards the people, because the people do not vote for the MPs. People vote for political parties, and political parties have managed to absorb, suck in the entire society and force us to live in really awful conditions of repression for years, of conditions of disrespect of any rights, of justice, of law, of legal system. And I believe that we as civil society organizations, although if we do not focus ourselves and say jointly that this year what we want is to have open lists for the next elections, because we want to vote for individuals who will offer something specific and concrete. And from here we will start unbundling the reforms. I don't expect any reforms in the system or boost in the corruption reforms, because we have displaced the core for the accountability and responsibility. It should not be towards the political party but to those who are voting, and I think that this would be the basis if we want to hope that some changes would happen. The second thing that I want to talk about, we have there was a statement also indicated from my interview with Civil, which you can see on the slides in the back. I think that this year we will start to have the claritiveness of politicians, activists and political parties. It is indicated that the blockade of VMRO, DPMNE and DUI is scandalous in my opinion regarding the law on prevention and protection against discrimination. Why is it scandalous? Because DUI is a political party which says that in the core of its program and action the EU integrations are placed. DUI is the political party who is leading the EU integration department in the government of Macedonia. DUI is a political party who at the same time, all these months while leading the EU integrations department in the government, is blocking the law for which the European Commission says it is one of the requirements for the opening of the negotiations. So either I'm stupid and I don't understand something, and someone has to explain this to me. How can the political party, which has in the core of their political program and who is actually leading the integrations in the government and has all the resources there to take us a bit further in this integration processes, is at the same time blocking the law without which the European Commission says negotiations will not start unless we have it. So where is the truth here? I believe that this year we will start noticing the false statements, the false efforts, and perhaps we will also start observing the never distorted coalition between VMRO, DPMNE and DUI, which probably is based on the common value system that they share: corruption, populism, totalitarianism, and so on and so forth. That was the second issue that I wanted to mention. And the third one, before I conclude, good is that we finally, as a society, this year will have to overcome the panic and fear against the definitiveness of our status. I think that at this moment we are undergoing a panic condition because 30 years we probably were Slovenes, we were maybe anti-Slovenes, we maybe want to go to NATO or maybe not, we maybe want to go to EU or maybe we only want the money from the EU and nothing else, and through all that we were somehow managing in a fluid sort of manner, and I think that it somehow became a manner of living, a manner of self-observation, of self-acceptance, not having anything definite. We could have been Macedonia, Republic of Macedonia, Fyrom, and so on and so forth. Everything was fluid and could have been stated in different manners. Now we are, by the way, congratulations, we are now Republic of North Macedonia, and we are now becoming part of NATO, and hopefully we will open the negotiations and start moving towards the EU, which also means a definite status of this society, of this collective, and I think that we are facing huge panic and fear because we don't want to be definite in anything, who we are, where we are, and where are we going, but we will have to do that, and I think this is the right time for that. Thank you. I believe that it is not too early to congratulate ourselves, because we heard congratulations to those who are most to be congratulated to for bringing the country to NATO, and I think that we should congratulate ourselves, so I think it's not too early to do that. Of course, what lies ahead is the path towards EU integration and all those administrative, normative harmonization and so on and so forth. Without a doubt, we have the required capacity to do that. We also know that we are receiving the required assistance and support. In normative terms, we actually do not face major problems. The major challenge of ours lies in the fact that those norms are not being implemented. The question is why. In some other cases, and in the daily lives, and even today, we had opposing opinions being presented to us, and the arguments were always directed towards indicating and pointing someone else's mistakes or someone else's wrong decisions made, and etc. However, I believe that this is the position, this is the approach that we should change. What do I want to say with this? I would like to indicate that we will understand each other better if we sit down, discuss and recognize our not only personal but our wrong steps taken, our mistakes, so as to create the conditions in which we could entrust our cares in a more relaxed manner relating to whatever creates the mistrust between people, for example. At this event, I would like to emphasize the insufficient inter-ethnical trust. I will share with you an example. The example comes from my personal experience. Few months ago, I decided and succeeded, because I was worried about my health. I managed to lose about 10 kilos of my weight. If you want to know how, I'll share with you the diet afterwards. Gladly, I will share with you that. And now I have lost not only the kilograms, I have also lost the appropriate clothing. And I went to the tailors to correct my clothes. I chose a more mature gentleman whose appearance somehow embedded trust in me. So while making all the required measurements, I just mentioned while talking with him that I come from Tetovo. And this somehow motivated this gentleman to share his concerns that the Albanians have taken from us Popova Shapka. Of course, I didn't say that I'm not among those who allegedly took Popova Shapka. I just continued in a short, well-argumented debate, and at the end we jointly decided and agreed that no one has taken Popova Shapka, because there is a simple reason for that. They have nowhere to take it to. So I believe that such a debate would be very beneficial for the professors who are now protesting in the secondary chemical school. Of course, no one is without any mistakes or sins. We all make mistakes. So, speaking as an Albanian, and this is my opinion, maybe not all of you will agree with that, I will say that we should try with this approach as of the independence of the country as of 91. I think that the non-voting of the Albanians at the referendum for the independence of Macedonia would be a wrong decision, because part of the question then understood a potential alliance in the future with some of the former Yugoslav republics, by not perceiving the fact that until then we were in the alliance with those republics from that former Yugoslavia. And only one of them is currently our neighbor. And this was most surely not the single reason why the Macedonian politicians of those days insisted on drafting the constitution based on the principle of ethnic exclusivity. In addition, I am also sure that it also had an impact on encouraging the occurrence of such mistrust. I believe that this is important to be promoted by also higher political structures, state officials, and all those actors and stakeholders who have some sort of an impact on the creation of public opinion, because this is the only way in which we could better understand the position of the other citizens, of for example, what disturbs them, what is unclear for them, or what makes the future unclear for them, and so on and so forth. So I believe that in that manner we will be able to raise the level of mutual trust, because this is the only way in which the society can be ready for the big European family. We must not allow that our misunderstandings between our homes or institutions and just only transfer that debate to Brussels. I believe that this is something that we should previously resolve. Maybe not completely, but at least up to a great extent. And of course, those who have the greatest impact on the public opinion have also the greatest responsibility. But we have to build a healthy society of loyal citizens. It is simply unacceptable, and mildly said, incorrect, for the efforts or achievement of single national strives to be only aimed towards meeting some other national efforts or striving. So we have to find a way to coact, at least cohabitate, and this would be some sort of message of mine to all stakeholders as far as the perspectives are concerned and the things that we could change. Thank you for your attention. I will speak about three topics, three concepts of what lies ahead in 2019 and in the context of what happened in 2018 and somehow connect them. I will speak about environment, social justice and the forthcoming presidential elections. Why? In 2018, we witnessed environmental problems, and I'm not speaking only of air pollution, because this is the biggest problem during the winter, but also about the manner in which the problems with the landfills were dealt with, or the example with the students' dormitory, Pelagonia, indicating the development of our environmental consciousness. And in that context, I could indicate that besides all governmental measures, past and current, we are still facing an insufficiently developed environmental consciousness and awareness, and insufficient understanding of what the term environmental justice means. If we define it as proper behavior towards the environment and nature, and that if we do not behave in such a manner, there will be sanctions which are regulated by law, then we could freely say that our institutions, our citizens are not sufficiently contributing towards the implementation of these measures and laws. In all this chain, we could also connect social justice in the context of poverty, which not only contributes towards the dignity and reduction of the dignity of human people, but also reduces the human values. Our path towards the EU assumes the understanding of these green alternatives and the EU values, which is a path which is very difficult to walk on, and we are not completely sure how we will walk it through, although we are waiting for the start of the negotiations in June. Why do I want to speak about environment and social justice? Social justice in our country is not only related to poverty, but is also related to the violation of labor laws and rights, then also unemployment, or maybe in some other context overemployment, because whenever there are elections, and we will now face presidential elections, always these two topics and these two segments are spoken by the political parties in terms of how they will lead their political and election campaigns. And now, instead of selecting a president, because there was a presidential function in shadow and a president who created only conflicts rather than resolving the state and human related problems, and now we are facing a decision in which we have to select the best person who will lead our state, and our election campaign will be deduced to a resolution of local problems, that is actually of political profit making, which is one of the topics which are of course not the isolated ones. So what is left for us? Yesterday, at the event with the NATO flag, Prime Minister Zaev said zero tolerance for corruption, and hopefully with the newly established commission and with their first session they have come up with certain conclusions in terms of how to deal with the corruption in election concept. But I will also say zero tolerance for the violation of human voting rights, because instead of speaking about problems that really concern us, such as pollution or such as life for everyone, which means equal existence for everyone in the country, we will speak in the election campaigns and debate about how good is and updated is the election list, how many electoral irregularities might happen and should be prevented, and so on and so forth. However, we have to have elections that would somehow overcome such irregularities, and to have an election campaign that will really speak of a person who will present us in the state and will overcome the 10 years of rule of his predecessor. We will also face another institutional escape or attempt of the citizens to try to protect their guaranteed voting rights, rather than that being done by the competent authorities and the institutions. Of everything that was mentioned in the previous period and in the debate, I don't know what is left for me to say. I will just add regarding the presidential elections. It seems like there will be more or less some sort of a census of the population rather than real presidential elections, because we were able to see that Dui and Amdi Bayram are running, or he will be running for president. There are some announcements from the Albanians, from the Macedonians, and so now the situation will be everyone will vote for their own, regardless of what the candidates are. And this is not the way to do when we are trying to elect the head of state. Unfortunately, we are living in a society in which instead of reducing the nationalism, somehow in the last period it is rapidly increasing, and instead of speaking of essential problems and issues, we are perceiving them in ethnic context. For example, in Shuto Rizare, there was a fight, and there was a bunch of media indicating a Roma group has fought and beaten 2 Albanian cops. So there was an indication, an emphasis on the ethnic affiliation of both parties. But those media are not that keen when the Macedonian newspapers indicate, for example, the police has arrested an Albanian drug dealer. So in this case, the media will have huge responsibility about where the state will go to, whether we will have some positions that will feed nationalism or will end it. A few days ago, there was probably a comical NGO organization for protection of family values, something like that, and the same people are trying to preserve their family values by not allowing same-gender marriages, and they are teaching their children to hate everyone else who does not support the two-sex marriages. I will go back about what is happening in the among the Roma population. I think it's sort of a circus. I'm hardly trying to find another term for that. This speech will not be presented in any medium. But if Hamdi Bayram was here, his speech will be presented and published in all media. Why? Because it would be fun. He would mention Coca-Cola, he will speak other funny things, and so on and so forth. It's only a circus, and he has nothing essential to say. He has done nothing for the Roma population or any other Roma politician. There is a situation in which the President of the Assembly is talking in not to the Roma leader in not that polite manner of speaking. So instead of those Roma political leaders and MPs, instead of fighting for improving the life of the Roma population, they were only clicking the buttons in the MPs. There was a minister without portfolio. We know nothing of what he has done in the previous year. We don't know even what he looks like. Now, I would like to go back to something positive. Young people are not running away from the country because they cannot find a job in the state institution, if this was the last knowledge or statistics or knowledge by some ministers. Young people are running away from the country because quality personnel is not being employed where they should be employed, but but people are being employed due to some family relations. I don't say that those people should be left on the streets. On the contrary, they are, of course, some was children of ministers and officials, public officials. But I will say that we are now maybe over transparent. Don't be that transparent. We don't want to hear every day that a child of a politician was employed in some state institution. It hurts less, and it will not make me think as a young person that I should just simply take my passport and buy myself a one-way ticket. Thank you. I will try to somehow present what I was working on myself and as part of the dedicated team of Civil. A team which I really hope that every country would have and would lead the country, but not everyone can afford that luxury. I will just go in a summarized manner, indicating several points for which hopefully we will be able to debate upon and discuss throughout the year, all that in order to improve the democratic environment in Macedonia, to improve the situation of this country, in which we are able to see that many things are still the same. But first of all, to start by indicating the congratulations for those who were in the front rows in the process and those who helped the society, at least the progressive part of the society, which joined a strong historical process, a process in which the Macedonian and Greek PMs were at the front, and by which a very complicated and complex and absurd conflict between the two countries was overcome, thus deserving to be nominated for the Nobel Prize of Peace. Unlike some other Nobel Prize winners in the past, I believe that these two persons, if they win this prize, it would be well deserved. But to go back to our homes, there are few reasons to celebrate at home and very few reasons to congratulate for congratulations. Nevertheless, there was an interesting new way of electing the State Anti-Corruption Commission. We have come to certain modalities that were also envisaged in the law on prevention of corruption and conflict of interest, which envisage different commissions, but I will stop here with the compliments, because I still believe that the law on prevention of corruption has serious shortcomings. The election process of the Commission is new, interesting, and promises some sort of a new way of electing the members. However, the manipulators, because they are very crafty and skilled, were able to also enter this process as well. It is left to us to see in the next few weeks if they manage to do so. Nevertheless, I would like to wish the Commission and the General Secretariat of this Commission many success in the future period. And I'm aware that they have a work cut out for them. They have so much work, something that they cannot imagine even in their worst dreams. I support the idea that in the fight against corruption we need to include as much entities as possible, as much as individuals as possible, groups, organizations, and so on and so forth. And of course, I will agree with the statement of Professor Najczewska at the conference, Corruption-Free Society Conference, because the most responsible entities are the institutions. So we expect from the institutions to deal with the corruption in a different manner than it was in the past. And of course, that means that our institutions are very corrupted, and they are not imaginary creatures. They consist of people, a lot of corrupted individuals behaving in a corrupted manner in the institutions and entities in the country. Nevertheless, I would like to also note that in Macedonia, with the arrival of the new government, the concept was promoted, a single society for all concept, which is a new concept for the Balkans that could take Macedonia to the top in the region and even beyond, and convert it into a leader that might offer a contemporary, efficient model of a society and how society should and is able to function. However, unfortunately, the capacities of those who are to implement these concepts, as we were able to previously hear, that the citizens should be part of such concept as well. There was also a good example from the previous speaker, Aliti, and there was also a few good examples from our colleague Dehran, and previously. At the moment, we have a concept, single society for all ethnic communities, or even better, we have a single concept for a single society for all ethnic political party groups who, of course, profit on their nationalist perspectives because they want both money and power. And it is a situation in which it is difficult to accept the inertness of the institutions in which they just promote and declare the concept and go back to their old practices. And finally, the concept single society for all, we were able to see it, how it functions in the days when we had the revolution, colorful revolution, and previously on the events such as protests, stop for police brutality, and many other protests that were organized and held, and all other forms of expressions of revolt and displeasure against the regime of Gruevski, which was only once named as a fascist one. We cannot accept concepts that take us back to the room in which they are being planned. Nevertheless, there were also some good examples that something can be done, even if the system was such difficult and destroyed as the system of social justices, or the system in which labor is also regulated. And for me, which was very important, we were able to observe that there were serious efforts taken for deinstitutionalization in specific institutions in which the country allegedly looks after persons with special needs, with disabilities, and so on and so forth. We were able to see some good steps and measures taken in that direction. So we were able to see that it is possible for such things to happen. And all of us in civil were reminded of something that we 20 years ago promoted in the year 2000 in our efforts towards working with the institution and with the proteges being accommodated and living in the special institution in Demirkapia. So these are more or less good and positive examples for improvement of the international position, good examples for overcoming of disputes, and good examples of the fact that we could create an institution such as the Corruption Commission is, good examples in the practice in the Ministry of Labor and Social Policy. We can also add a few more such examples. We can also see on local level that there are some good examples realized by some of the mayors, but all of that kind of reminds us that all good examples show that things could have been done and are not being done. So in that respect, I believe that nationalism is really rising and is being used in the most inhumane way as tool for power and money, as tools to acquiring a better position in the negotiations with those being in charge of the government, both in local and central level, and nothing else. Those who promote nationalism, hate, gas chambers are not patriots. No, they're not. We know, we have all the arguments to establish that those are only people who want more power and more money. The corruption in the Republic of North Macedonia is deeply rooted in the society, and it is very difficult for us to deal with this issue, especially due to the fact that it is rather obvious that those who have the power, who are the government, are not decisive enough to overcome that system that was established in the 1990s. It continued in the 2000 and onwards, and there is no determination to eliminate such a corrupted system from the face of the earth, but only cosmetic changes are being made. And this is the harsh reality that gives us room to doubt that all these adverse trends and processes being perceived as a society, that these are either intentionally tolerated or even generated in the centers of power, such as nationalism, corruption, and political corruption, bribery, buying of votes, and so on and so forth, and many, many more other issues and problems. But most of all, these are situations that enable the rule of a system in which people die slowly or fast, but they die as a result of the poor system managed by people who are not competent or who are corrupted. By this I refer to the health, in which we daily have cases of child deaths. We have an education in which we generate people, young people, who will either leave the country very soon if they are more capable, or, as I recently heard from a discussion, that, for example, there will be no one to bury us in the future at a given point of time, or are completely illiterate and are subjected to manipulations and propaganda of those who just aspire towards much more power and money. Justice is something that we searched for for months. We have colored Skopje 2014, which is only cleaned a bit with some cosmetic measures undertaken, including the fence at the government building, and we were able to see many different types and forms of amnesty, something which was very unpleasant for all of us in the past period. And of course, I would also want to say something that with different people with whom I have debated in the past, I am able to feel now, fortunately, that we have some that something is bringing us closer. And I had discussions with Krzalovsky as well from the center, who told me that in his opinion 50 or 60, 70,000 administrative workers should be laid off and dismissed. Yes, this is something that I have written in my article a few days ago, and and I believe that the administration is really a huge and serious problem of the country, and if someone wants to show decisiveness, it should cut it into half. So 50, 60,000 people should leave our back because they are too much for us to bear with. They need to leave, and the government should be creative and allocate funds for social programs, for their additional qualification, for subsidizing of their new businesses, retire some of them, and etc., etc. So this could be even a bigger problem problem than everything else that I have mentioned, because if if we relax the country in such a manner, there will be lack of political armies and forces who will be forced to vote for a certain political party. And the corruption and injustice and all problems of state begins and ends with the election processes. And we have such problems a lot. For 2019, I expect that perhaps there will be another election process, because if the presidential election process fails, we will face and another one after 6 months, and it will be a period in which the political leaders a little bit hiding behind the front and the curtain and disguising it with the success in terms of NATO and negotiations with EU, and they will not resist the challenge to make another election circus, and which would result into us having double elections by the end of the year, unless there is some change in the trends of which all of us have discussed today. In addition, for this year, unfortunately, I do not expect any improvement of the corruptive behavior and scandals that we are unfortunately witnessing on a daily basis, and I do not expect that the concept single society for all will live further, but it will be a single society for all ethnic communities, for all political parties, and so on and so forth. I do not expect that the commencement of the construction of the new contemporary clinic center will mean the improvement of the health care situation in the country, and I do not expect that someone will sit down and revise those stupid textbooks from which our children are forced to study on a daily basis. I expect a strong core of civil activists, fighters and promoters of human rights and freedoms who will continue to be strong and loud, and who will ask for responsibility and discipline from the political elites, and not only people who only perceive their political benefit, power and money in each one of us. Thank you very much.
Civil Media